the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. This video, I'm just going to talk a bit about some parallels that I've noticed. And I haven't had a lot of time to really think about all of them. I'm sure there's a lot more. But it's really kind of piqued my interest a little bit, and I do plan on looking into it a little bit more. And it has to do with a pattern that I've noticed in regards to where this country is headed, things going on within the church, and then how they parallel what happened to Jesus. So I'll get right into that. I also want to make a note here before I forget, is I'm going to be posting a video that I watched recently that was done in regards to the McCarrick cover-up. And I think that is relevant, okay, to kind of some of the things that I'm going to talk about. And it's still, going through that, I still think it's a lot bigger than most people think in regards to cover up and people that were involved and things like that. So with that being said, there are certain things I can say, certain things I won't say, that I don't want to end up, committing suicide or anything. But I've noticed some patterns, and I want to point those out. And so I talked a little bit about in the last video the way that our country, the United States, and I'm not speaking of the people in general, I'm talking about corrupt politicians and people that are interested in making money off war and spreading influence and that kind of thing. The way we've gone in and changed governments and put other people in power, and then kind of how that turns over. And I think really what you're going to see in this, towards the end of this anyway, is that what seems to be happening now is that our government is using the exact same tactics that we would use overseas or in another country to change a regime. They're using the exact same tactics, only they're doing it to our country. And so there's a lot of things that have gone on and that are odd, like purchasing thousands of AR-15s for IRS agents, which is really odd, and millions of rounds of ammunition for IRS agents, which is odd. But there are patterns here, and so I want to begin with the gospel, because that's really what it comes down to, is the words of Jesus, that all nations will hate you because of my name, the persecutions of the church and the things like that. So when we look at the passion of Jesus, okay, the church must follow in those footsteps, okay, as taught by the Catechism. And so when we look at that, it parallels a lot of what we see happening in the church and a lot of what we see happening in the world and in this country. Jesus was falsely accused, and they spread the rumors and kept looking for ways to trap him. One of the things that I've noticed, and this is one of the parallels, is that this magisterium and this pope have been falsely accused by an archbishop that's very popular, by a number of very popular lay people. They plant suspicion, like ordaining women deacons and things like that. Okay, which never happened, and now no one's saying, we were wrong. All those same people that were saying he was going to do that are not now saying that they were wrong. They're just moving on to the next accusation. Incidentally, a lot of these people that were doing that were also supporting the archbishop that seems to be covering, or was covering, for Cardinal McCarrick, which is odd, like as odd as the IRS thing. So wolves in sheep's clothing, you got to really watch for them. Now when you move into the political aspect of it in our country, you see the same thing kind of happening, and we've done this before in the past. Is we will go into a country, we will make a politician that is popular, unpopular, and then remove him from power, remove and put the person that we want in power, and then there's always chaos that follows, in which they call off elections, and that person remains in power forever. Okay, we did the same thing in Iraq, and Saddam Hussein ruled forever until we got tired of him and removed him. We did the same thing in Ukraine. That's what we see happening in Ukraine. Okay, in Jesus's day, they falsely accused him. They plotted against him. The people that were in authority, they got people behind him. And his betrayal was well funded. So that's another thing to notice, is that Jesus's betrayal was well funded, right? 30 pieces of silver. The betrayal that we see happening in the church today is also well funded. A lot of these people that are very popular, lay people, with, podcasts and YouTube channels, are making a lot of money. And so it's very well funded. And it's to the point almost to where I'm not even sure they read their comments anymore. They just do what they do. And so the same thing is happening. It's very well funded. They make a lot of money off it, and they falsely accuse the magisterium and the Pope and anybody else that disagrees with them. We see the same thing happening in politics. There's a false narrative. You pit people against each other. You make it a race war, or race revolution. And it's very well funded by people like George Soros and the Tides Foundation. And so you see a lot of the same thing that happened in Jesus's day. Remember in Jerusalem the riots broke out, and there was, they were excuse me, they were trying to quell it, and it all surrounded Jesus. Well, you see the same type of uprising in the church, and they're all trying to quell it, and it all surrounds Pope Francis and the magisterium. You see the same thing happening in politics in the United States. They're trying to quell it on one side and stir it up on the other, and it all revolves around Donald Trump. Now, with that being said, I'm not going to get into who to vote for or anything like that. Personally, I believe that this country is on the verge of collapse, financially, morally, and politically. And they're using the exact same tactics that they've used in the past to bring about a regime change in other countries, to bring about a regime change, a permanent regime change here in the United States. And that's exactly what's happening. The other things we see is that another parallel would be there's rules for thee, but not for me. Okay? So in Jesus's day, they could accuse, they could falsely accuse, they could slander, they could lie, they could do all that. And it was okay for them to do that. But then when you look at what they were accusing Jesus of, they were taking some of the things he said and twisting them. And so the same thing's happening with Pope Francis. They'll take things out of context. They will twist his words. They will jump to conclusions. They hide truth. And I personally witnessed that and have seen that. It was actually scandalized by it. Where news agencies would cover up stories where the Pope was trying to make things clear on certain documents. YouTubers who would only show portions of papal documents to make their point and push their agenda, which is basically a far-right radical traditionalist agenda. You see the same type of tactics on the far left progressives in the church that, Pope Francis writes a document, says bless the person, and all of a sudden you see a priest blessing two people holding hands. And so all these things cause scandal. You see the same mistakes, I would say moral mistakes being made on both sides. But the same thing happens in politics, as they will twist words. where one person can smash cell phones and whitewash cell phones and destroy evidence, and they get off scot free, and another person, they're given the full weight of the law. And they actually changed laws in New York to bring about this conviction. So the the I can't remember what it's called, but there it's so much time had passed in one of these things that it was beyond, you know, the I think it's the statute of limitations where they can come back and accuse and then convict. They actually changed the law to go all the way back to the very day. It was so obvious. It's obvious what they're doing here is they're trying to destroy a political opponent. Um, in Jesus's day, they took the innocent that was being falsely accused, and his false accusations and everything going on was well funded. They ended up persecuting him and throwing him in jail. And we are seeing the same thing in the Catholic Church. There was a certain archbishop that called for the arrest of Pope Francis and wanted to throw him in jail, and are throwing a lot of accusations against Pope Francis that actually are not true, and now we're finding that out, which kind of makes me wonder what some of these people that are prominent lay people that have been defending this and going along with that narrative and spreading that narrative, um, how they're going to respond to this when the truth comes out, because it is coming out. And that's well funded as well. So there's a lot of money involved. But we see the same thing happening in politics. So in Ukraine, for instance, we went in, we removed a regime. We put Zelensky in power. Zelensky started to persecute his opposition and started putting him in jail. And that's what we see happening in the United States. That's exactly what is happening in the United States. And it's really it's evil. There's no other way to say it. It's evil. So I, I don't. This has nothing to do with Donald Trump or President Biden. I found it kind of ironic in one of his last statements. When the conviction came, he said no one's above the law, and then all of a sudden he was trying to change laws when his son went to court the next week. So we'll see if no one's above the law. They seem to be no one's above the law only when they're your political opponent in the United States now. But I think what you're going to see is the same type of tactics that went on with the last election. This is really they control the narrative by controlling the media. They control. They use government agencies to carry out their agenda, much in the same way that the Sanhedrin used Rome to carry out their agenda. Um, and we're seeing the same thing in the church, where um, people will lean on others that are in high positions of authority um, to push their agenda. And there's going to be a conflict here, I think, soon, because um, on one hand, you can't remain faithful to Rome, and on the other hand, support people that are not remaining faithful to Rome. And so, I think you're going to see some people come into a conflict. But it's really, really important for us to pray for this country. And I'm going to reiterate that message, is to pray the chaplet of divine mercy every day and offer it in reparation for the sins of this country, because the United States is on the verge of collapse, and they know it, and they're one step away. It is it's a Marxist, communist, ideological takeover. It's a coup d'état. And so, I don't know how many of you are familiar with psychology, but a sociopath or an extreme narcissistic person will accuse others of what they themselves are doing. And it's one of the ways of knowing which way they're going to move, because they literally tell you by accusing the other of exactly what they're going to do. And so, all you have to do is look at all the things they've accused President Trump of. Remember, they were saying when he was in office, they were saying he's going to start World War III. He's going to start World War III. Well, it turns out he didn't. There was no wars, and it was the others that started it. And World War III has already begun. We should know that, and we need to pray again for that because we're one step away from this going into full blown chaos. And I think you're going to see the enemy um, pour that out full strength. It's going to come from every direction. Riots in the streets, false accusations. We see conservatives being arrested by the FBI, going in and raiding their homes and that kind of thing. And so, like I say, I do need to be careful about what I say because I really don't want to get raided, to be honest with you. I'm not much of a threat, but still, what they do is they make an example of people. And so the answer to this is prayer. Um, and then you throw into the mix all these different messages and seers and things like that are all being promoted, that are constantly talking, uh, spreading doomsday messages and chastisements. And we already know all about this, but to fill people's minds with this over and over and over again, it just brings despair and people lose hope. And one of the things that I've heard is, they're all saying the same thing. Well, in Washington, they're all saying the same thing about Donald Trump. That doesn't make it true. There's a lot of people on the far left progressive side of the church, and a lot of people on the far right radical traditionalist side of the church that are all saying the same thing about Pope Francis, and it's not true. And so it's like I say, the way to when you stand back and look at this, for me anyway, I see the exact same thing happening that happened to Jesus. It's happening in the church today. It's happening in the political sense today, in the political arena, and it's evil. And so there are people that are literally under the influence of Satan. There are people that are promoting a satanic agenda. I think it goes beyond wanting to push, um, communism and Marxism. It's satanic. It's demonic. When you look at this country and the way it's lost its morals, the breakup of the family, we took God out of schools and the gangs moved in. Um, it's an amazing thing to really stand back and look at how the tactics are the same, whether you're talking about the political arena or you're talking about the church and what's going on in the church. They're using the same tactics. I think some of these people are doing it without even realizing they're doing it. um, and then you see the same thing, that it's the exact same thing that happened to Jesus. And it just, I don't know, it just popped in my head today. It was just really clear to be able to see the influence of the devil. It just mirrors what they did to Jesus. And the final persecution of the church will mirror exactly what they did to Jesus. Um, Jesus was betrayed. The church will be betrayed. The United States has been betrayed. And so I can't reiterate that message enough, is to pray the chaplet of divine mercy every day and to offer in reparation for the sins of this country. Because I think the closer we get to the election, um, the more fuel that's going to be poured on the fire, and really educate yourself um, about the agenda. Educate yourself with the it seems like I think I've said it before. They want to start a civil war, not only in this country and in other countries, a revolution, but they're trying to start a civil war and a revolution within the church. And they did the same thing in the gospel. The people in authority sided with pagan Rome and destroyed, literally murdered their salvation. Um, it's just an amazing thing when you look at the parallels. So, pray for the United States, pray for this election. Um, I think that as far as the conviction against the former president, I can't say for sure, but it seems to me that if this goes to the Supreme Court, it would be overturned. So if it starts to move in that direction, you can, probably uh, almost guarantee, there's going to be riots and things like that somewhere because these things are well funded and they want to push an agenda. They want to cause fear. And we're not called to fear. We've been given in a spirit of adoption. And the fact of the matter is, the only way out of this is not an election, not a politician, not a government, um, not even a pope. The only way out of this is God. It is Jesus. And we have to remain focused on Him. With that being said, I'll end with this. There was a post that I had left on the community section of the channel, and someone pointed out to me that there was a subliminal um, tone to it that was really disgusting, and I didn't see it. I absolutely did not see it until someone pointed it out, and I recently took it off. But if by chance you guys see something like that I post that I don't notice, feel free to leave a comment, and I will remove it. Um, I also have taken off some of the shorts that I've done. They were causing more harm than good, I think, as far as secular people leaving comments and things like that. It went a lot further than I thought it was. It was just kind of a funny jokes I was making to myself and to my viewers, but they took off. So it's really an amazing thing to me that I can do a short and talk about how much Jesus loved his mother, and it'll get 4,000 views. But if I do a short and I kick a rubber guy in the head, it gets 10,000 views. So when I talk about vegans or advocates for not eating meat, wearing leather and things like that, it blows up, and so I end up with a lot of fallout from it. So it's just not worth the time. Maybe I'll just keep it short and simple. But notice the parallels, because the church, as the Catechism says, the church will follow her Lord in his passion, death, and resurrection. And when the Catechism teaches that, it means exactly in the footsteps of Christ. And so when you start to break down the way Jesus was falsely accused, the way Jesus was betrayed, the way Jesus was persecuted, the way Jesus was lied about, the way Jesus was put in prison, and eventually crucified, the church will follow in those exact same footsteps. All you have to do is kind of draw yourself out of it and look at the parallels that are going on in the church right now, happening in the church, and what is happening in the political aspect, not only in this country but the world. Okay, so there will be 10 kings or 10 rulers of Antichrist, and that's what we see happening now. Okay, Our Lady of Good Success has told us very, very clearly that this is Masonic in nature, and so it is the antithesis of what the church is, and it's demonic. And so it's just a matter of being aware and staying awake. And again, don't get caught up in the fray. Don't get caught up in the next thing that arises. Don't always stand back, look at it clearly, and prayerfully discern. And because without prayer, without the gift of discernment, there are going to be a lot of people that are led astray. There are going to be a lot of people that don't have the faith to go through the persecutions and things that are coming. Um, the Catechism teaches that too. Many will fall away due to the persecution. They do not have the faith. And so we need to pray for this country. We need to pray that the Lord pour out his grace and mercy on this world, that there is an increase of faith, and we can never ever be afraid to speak about Jesus to people and to speak the truth. And so, as it goes, I think you're going to see more people, such as myself, as well as others, begin to speak more boldly about this. And, pray for unity in the church. Remember, division is cast out by love. Okay, what creates division in the church is sin. And so, preach the truth. Pray for the priest to preach the truth, whether it's convenient or not, whether people want to hear it or not. It's not their job to change their hearts. Jesus does that. But when a priest preaches truth, whether it's convenient or inconvenient, God himself anoints their words, and it brings about conversion. One of the last things that I would point out is, if you look at the difference of narrative that are coming from some within the church against this magisterium and this pope, compared to the narrative that's coming out of Medjugorje. Compare the narrative to what's coming out of Medjugorje to the narrative of all these, messages and seers and things like that. It's very clear. And those who have ears to hear can hear Our Lady. And there's a difference in the way that things are said and things are spoken. And so pray for the Pope, pray for the priests, pray for the bishops, and pray the Chaplet of Divine Mercy every day, and offer in reparation for the sins committed by the United States. May God bless you, may he keep you, may he cause his face to shine upon you, and may he grant you his peace. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.